Close.
Welcome to our first of a series of community design, community theme end of the month workshops. Today we are joined by Amanda Cremona, who is going to be taking us through really summarizing some of the really good points that we've been touching on in this month's community theme, which has been mental health. There's been so many really good questions and polls that have generated so much discussion, and they've really taught, at least me, they've taught me a great deal of things. I'm sure other community members as well. So towards the end of each month of this year, 2021, we will be summarizing the theme of that month with a presentation, a workshop led by an expert in that field. So to kick us off, to be the very first of this kind, we're joined by Amanda here, who's been with us since really the very early days of the community. Welcome, Amanda.
Welcome, thank you. Yeah, QT5, so back in August, I think.
God, yeah,
so
that's
quite a while
ago. Yeah, at the moment of recording, we are into QT 14, I believe. About to start QT 15 on Wednesday, the 3rd of February. So that's how far we've come, and this is really the point that we're at now. So I'm very, very excited about this. Amanda's going to be taking us through, and hopefully you'll all learn a great deal of things about this important topic. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. Okay, it's a bit of a sort of whistle-stop tour, really. So I'll share screen to give you presentation.
Wonderful.
Okay, we're looking at mental health, a quick whistle-stop tour through some of the areas, and particularly bringing it back to children and young people, and how we as tutors can help with some of the things that might occur. We'll cover during the presentation what a mentally healthy person looks like, what is mental health, mental health in children and young people, common mental health problems that can occur in children and young people, and adults for that matter, the risk and protective factors that occur, and focusing more into anxiety and the signs and symptoms of anxiety, and what we can maybe do to help that, because that's really prevalent at the moment in our current environment. And lastly, just how we as tutors can support our students and their mental health.
Right.
So first, what does a mentally healthy person look like? Hopefully someone that has good self-esteem, self-acceptance. They know who they are as a person. They can realize their own potential and the potential within the world, what they can look to do. Maintain fulfilling relationships, so positive relationships within their circle. Also having a sense of autonomy, so knowing who they are as a person, and then that leads on to a sense of competence, mastery and purpose. And I believe purpose is extremely important in life, and having a purpose can get you through some really tough times if needed. One definition of mental health is that it's a state of well-being where each individual realizes his or her own potential. They can cope, can work, and can make a valid contribution to community. What's said here is important in order to also recognise what's not good mental health, which leads me to the point of the amount of people that will experience some mental illness at some point in their lives, which currently is about 1 in 4 people, which is quite a shocking statistic, really. Mental health can be seen as a continuum where people can move up and down the continuum in varying degrees at different points in life, and this is certainly not something that is fixed by any means. You know, again, people, depending on what their difficulties are, the support systems they have in place, you know, can move up here. Hopefully they don't reach here within their life, but you know, some people do, and again, it's having those support systems in place. So just to reiterate, mental health is something that's really important, something everyone has. It's intrinsically linked to your physical health, and as we've said before, it's on a continuum. It's certainly something that's worth making time for, and it's part of being human. It's something we need to look after, so self-care is really important. And as we've said before, it's changeable. In contrast to mental health is mental illness, which is no less important than maintaining good mental health. Unfortunately, there's still stigma attached to the idea of mental illness. And it's therefore important to note that mental illness is not a sign of weakness. It's not shameful or embarrassing. And it's not about feeling bad all the time. It's about that continuum again. It's not something you can snap out of. And importantly, it's not something that's always visible. So you may come across people that internally are really struggling, but their coping mechanisms or their strategies make them appear fine on the outside. Leading into children and young people's mental health, it's really never been so high on the agenda as it has been in recent years. And there has been an increase in that for various reasons. And it's crucial that greater support's put in place for children and young people, because at the moment, I think the general feeling is that there's not enough support, whether that be in CAMS, the mental health services, or within schools themselves. And it's important because with leading into adulthood, 75% of those that have problems in adulthood experience those as teenagers or early 20s. Around half of all of mental health problems start in their mid-teens and 3/4 by their mid-20s. So again, early intervention is crucial in order to support those people and hopefully put it in some kind of order before they reach adulthood. And staggeringly, 12.5% of 5 to 19-year-olds in England have got at least one mental disorder, which equates to 1 in 8 children. So 3 people, 3 children in every class could have a mental health disorder.
Yeah, that's a really shocking statistic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's you know, and possibly growing at the moment. And even more so that 5% meet the criteria for 2 or more, which is really high. On this slide, I've given 8 examples of sort of common mental health problems experienced by children and young people. Today, we're going to focus on anxiety. I think the depression and the experience of self-harm for many children again is increasing, and schools have a hard job on their hands in dealing with this kind of behaviour. Anyway, going back to anxiety, it's really increased over the current time, so we'll look at that in more detail. There's an array of risk factors that can make children and young people more at risk of being susceptible to having a mental health problem. To begin with, I'll talk about the individual factors, so the individual child. And these can be things such as genetics, if their parent has a mental health problem themselves. It can occur through learning communication difficulties and academic failure, where they're really struggling, and again, which in turn can create low self-esteem, or if they just generally have low self-esteem for whatever reason. And physical illness as well. Ongoing physical problems can lead to some kind of mental difficulties. Within the family, family disharmony can create real difficulties for children, particularly if they're experienced parents going through maybe separation, divorce, or just that the parents are not getting along. And within the whole family with siblings, everything, you know, a mismatch within all of that, that it can create real problems for them. And parents with mental illness, and this goes in sort of two parts. It can, parents with mental illness brings back the fact of genetics that can make the child at risk, as well as, you know, the child living in an unhealthy environment because of the parent possibly having a mental illness. And again, any kind of abuse, neglect, and experience loss and grief. And we perhaps don't sometimes realise the effect that that can have on children, because they perhaps don't know how to speak about it and how to talk about it, and some may need actually professional help to deal with their emotions because of it. In school, again, it's really about having negative experiences within school, such as bullying, discrimination, peer pressure, all of which can create some kind of turmoil for the young person, which can lead to an increase in problems. And friendships can be a huge part of that.
Yeah, and these are risk factors that we need to be aware of as tutors, aren't they? These ones that happen kind of in school.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we may not ever be aware of them. And sometimes it's maybe picking up just something a child has said, you know, a very brief comment about school or about a friendship or about that actually might get you thinking something's, you know, something's amiss. And again, obviously within school, the academics and the learning also plays a part within that. But yeah, I think, and particularly as children get into sort of adolescence, this area becomes greater, because naturally they become more that, you know, their peers are a lot more influential. So they steer away from sort of being influenced quite so much by home. And so again, that's all a risk factor for them if they, you know, if they get into a bad group of children or whatever, and are led somewhere that maybe they shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's a risk factor for the parents as well, probably too.
Well, absolutely, and how you deal with that. And community risk factors can play their part, such as, you know, overwhelming events can be huge, and as is, like I said, sort of loss, grief, abuse, and of course currently the pandemic would be put into that category, because it's something none of us have ever experienced before, having been put into the situation that we are.
Yeah, it's important as well to think that the overwhelming events might kind of percolate through all those other factors that we've mentioned there. They might sort of interlink, and it might
absolutely, you know, it could lead into you know, parents having a mental problem, you know, their lack of mental health themselves because they're struggling with the environment, you know, working at home, and the pressures of homeschooling, all of that kind of thing, which then has some effect on the child. So leaving on to sort of the protective factors, and again, this is maybe something that us tutors can help with, is sort of protecting our younger people from what they might experience, or knowing how to deal with what they are experiencing. From an individual point of view, it's having a positive attitude, good communication skills, and again, experience success and achievement for all of us is something that we all need and want in life. So just giving you an example of a protective factor, it's an individual having a positive attitude, you know, being able to look at the positive side of a situation, and that can be a real barrier to experiencing mental health problems by just naturally having some kind of positivity or having a positive outlook within themselves. Again, protective factors within the family is having, you know, family harmony and stability and creating a healthy environment at home. School, having positive school experience also feeds, and it also feeds back to a positive attitude. Schools can create this by having an environment that has areas such as zero tolerance to bullying, or encouraging an open door policy to make children feel comfortable talking about their feelings or their concerns, particularly if they don't feel they have somebody at home to do that with. And within the community, having a wider support network is really important, and again, particularly when there's a lack of support within their own family. So looking specifically at young people, adolescents, which we'd look at sort of age 10 to 19, in areas such as social inclusion, discrimination, or risk-taking behaviours, those that have sort of pre-existing mental health conditions can be particularly vulnerable. One thing that can really heighten this is the use of social media. We now have a society of children that just don't stop. They are constantly available and expect to be constantly available by their friends. And just the whole aspect of social media is showing some of the problems it's causing. Don't get me wrong, there is also some really good, and particularly at the moment, it is a way of children connecting and having that ability to connect. But it's knowing when, it's about balance, I suppose, isn't it? It's knowing actually when I just need some time away from this and putting it aside. Yeah. It's like, I think phones are attached to them now, and they actually go into some kind of meltdown when they don't know where they are. Yeah. Sorry, you go.
It's just about, I think, knowing when to put the phone or the gadget or the screen away.
Yeah,
they can be useful for sure, but it's about knowing what the times of days are that it can just go away, and that time can be spent with those in your household.
Yeah, and exactly that. And it's about connecting with the people that are actually there sometimes. And like I said, it's really hard because it is, not just for young people, as adults as well. I think we've even got more into using them, but it's knowing that, you might have 100 emails, but you don't need to reply to them all straight away. It's okay. So it's about moderation, and it's about a balance with things like that. And again, with young people, it's really encouraging sort of psychological well-being and protecting them from some adverse experiences if we're able to. And it's particularly important as they transition into adulthood. And here's just a quote which has come from a young person, actually, that's about social media. So signs of a mental health problem, as I've previously said, they're not always obvious. There may be something that's noticed or said that is apparent, but very often they're quite hidden signs. So with students, it's looking for something unusual, something that's not usual behaviour for them. Things like they might become irritable or anxious, or even to the point of angry over things, and that's not usual for them. Complaints of headaches, tummy aches, racing heart, things like that. One that's really key to look out for is low mood. Now, we all experience low mood. We all have a day where we're fed up, and that might last for 2 or 3 days sometimes. But it's particularly concerning when this goes on for more than a couple of weeks, because it could be a sign of some underlying greater difficulty, such as depression. So again, it's really important to sort of look out for that. And again, some pointers with that, if they might just mention in passing sort of all that they can't sleep, or they're sleeping a lot, or they don't want to get out of bed, they're all sort of slight signals that something might be wrong. And again, it's really difficult at the moment, because we've all got to work a bit harder at finding purpose. So getting out of bed maybe is that little bit harder at the moment for us all. So, and again, going back, a decrease in self-esteem, where you've got somebody that's usually quite a positive person and they're just becoming negative about themselves, or something like that. Being late for sessions, not attending, or making excuses and avoiding. Again, if that's unusual for them, why is that happening? A good big marker is if they're not going to school, which of course at the minute they're not going to school, but not doing homework or their extracurricular. Noticing maybe some weight loss or gain, or them saying that they, they hadn't eaten or something like that, again, can be signs there's something amiss. And physical appearance, as a student that is normally, does their hair, dresses night or whatever. And again, at the moment, we're all more casually dressed because we're working from home, and we have the scenario that you've got your nice shirt on, but actually you've got your shorts on underneath. But just generally, if they look a bit unkept, or they look a bit like they're neglecting themselves, and that's unusual, is something to look out for. Their self-care is below their usual standard. We'll go into anxiety a bit more, and some of the physical symptoms of anxiety, and they can be quite worrying and scary if you experience them, and particularly if you haven't ever experienced something before, and a child might think that there's something seriously wrong with them. Common symptoms are tummy aches, headaches, sort of having heart palpitations, so their breathing changes, and within that, it's maybe looking into the situation of what's provoking maybe that anxiety. And some children and their parents don't realize that the symptoms that a child is having is anxiety.
Yeah.
If a child is continually complaining of tummy ache or something, a one-off time is one thing, but if it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah, I think this is a really important graph, actually, because some of these that you wouldn't necessarily know that this might be linked to anxiety at all.
No, exactly.
Together, perhaps a few of these signs together are pretty indicative of something being not quite right.
Yeah, absolutely. An example, a child sleeping away from home experience tummy ache. It could be that they have separation anxiety, and they're struggling being away from home. It can be the same for some children going to school. So it's looking at the bigger picture. Like I said, a one-off experience is fine, but if it's becomes habitual as well, is another difficulty, and it's looking at the source of that. The source of it, and looking at, say, a frequent pattern of it being a behavior. If they've got tummy ache because they've eaten something that hasn't agreed with them, that's one thing, but and we can't dismiss that either. I was, just as a couple of examples, I was working with I still am working with a 15-year-old, and he's fairly recently had some tests because he was experiencing some heart palpitations, which were really worrying for him. However, it looks as though they're feelings of anxiety, and so now it's currently, his carer is currently looking into, you know, what's causing that, what's the underlying problem. I had another boy who was 14 earlier last year, who again kept feeling sick while he was in class, and he'd have to leave because it was to a point that he actually felt he was going to be sick. And it was happening more in certain lessons. So when we talked through what he was experiencing and each of his lessons, it became quite clear that it was more apparent in certain lessons. And surprisingly, it was the lessons where the teacher was asking him questions on the spot, or he expected the teacher to be asking him, and even more so where he knew he was going to be being asked to read aloud in class, and it was causing him huge anxiety. You know, he had dyslexia, so again, one of those real difficulties, and it was causing anxiety. And having sort of realised that, and being in touch with school, a plan was put in place for him to make the teachers aware, to give him maybe some advance notice of that, you know, of the question that he might be asked, so that he had time to prepare for it. And just, you know, don't ask him to read aloud in front of his peers, you know, because otherwise what he's doing is leaving class and not coming back. So actually he's missing, you know, it's weighing up what's more benefit, having him in class not reading aloud, or he's going to end up leaving and missing the whole of the rest of the lesson. So, you know, it really did help having other people realizing what was wrong, and also having other people aware of what was wrong, so they didn't, you know, trigger that anxiety in him. Along with the physical symptoms of anxiety, there's also emotional ones that, you know, can occur in people. They might become a bit more agitated, or a bit irritable, or even angry, because they're in a fight or flight state. And it's as though they're feeling under attack, and their body goes into a sort of coping mechanism or a protective mechanism. And sometimes having to deal with that can make people sort of fairly short-tempered. And I don't know whether people are realizing it even at the moment, going shopping. You know, I think everybody is slightly more on edge. So that person that might well, you know, push in front of you, you know, some people might be quicker to react to that than they would in normal circumstances. And again, it's because of the anxiety that the pandemic is creating in this as we go out into the community. So, you know, it's bearing that in mind, and you know, when just maybe being a little bit more patient with certain things, and having an understanding where maybe that's where it's coming from. It might just be somebody that's just completely rude anyway, in which case fine, but it may be a symptom that they're actually really struggling, and it's a really big deal for them to go shopping, and they're in a sort of slight edgy state, and that one thing pushes them into a place of anxiety. So there's quite, anxiety can affect about 25% of children, particularly adolescents, as they, you know, between 13 and 18 as they get older. And again, because a lot more is coming in their, you know, they're worried about what their peers think of them, how they're achieving at school, the pressures of school. So it can really increase. What's really important though to remember is, you know, particularly because some symptoms can be really worrying and scary, but these symptoms are not going to hurt you, and they will go away when you feel calm again. That's, you know, it's really important to sort of stress that to people. So a couple of tricks of the trade, if you like. I mean, I'd love to be able to go into some in more detail. However, just for now, a couple of quick strategies that you can do, and you can do with your students. You know, if you feel they're a little bit on edge as they come into the session, One of them that's really commonly used is sort of the 4-7-8. Some people have their numbers slightly changed depending, but it's about, you know, inhaling for 4, holding for 7, exhaling for 8, and it just naturally calms your system. Do you want to try it, Ludo?
Absolutely. Okay, so
Have a
this
go.
is to be used when? Just while I'm doing this, perhaps you could explain when this is.
So when you're feeling when you're feeling like you're maybe getting a little bit anxious, where you're feeling like you're a little bit tense, it's good to sort of do this before it gets any bigger. Yeah, because once you get into full sort of, you know, state of panic attack, it's you know, it's a lot harder. But just when you feel that your anxiety might be building, or you feel that you're getting tense, or you feel a bit of tummy ache or a headache, just breathe in for 4 and hold it for 7.
That was really good, actually.
And then exhale for 8.
I can so see how that's really calms the mind, even if it artificially, even if it feels like you're doing it on purpose.
Yeah,
It doesn't really matter. It's about overcoming
yeah,
sometimes the physiological feelings. I know one thing that certainly I often did if I was ever feeling, perhaps this is not so linked to mental health, but it could be linked to those who suffer from feelings of sickness when their mental health is poor, is I used to yawn. Yawning actually really helped the sickness feeling go away. So I don't know if that's
wow,
grounded in any kind of
yeah,
science or whether that's just completely individual to me. But
yeah. But it's finding those things that work, isn't it? And you know, what work for the individual. You know, there's not everybody will want to do that. And again, it's for children. I mean, let's going back to the boy when he was in class with that was having feeling sick and everything. We sort of worked on this, and I said it's something you can do, and nobody needs to notice that you're doing it. You know, if you feel that you're getting a bit tense in class, or your tummy is starting to make you feel a bit sick, just put your pen down, you know, look down and just breathe. Nobody else, your peers, your teacher, nobody else needs to know that that's what you're doing. And it just can calm you enough that you can then stay in class, you know. And I mean, I can sometimes do it when I'm, you know, out and about, and I have an experience where I'm thinking, okay, just calm down, and I'll just stop for a second. And that's, you know, it doesn't take long. Another good one to sort of refocus thoughts, and again, that's something that is a calming strategy, is particularly when you're in sort of that state of anxiety, is to actually refocus. You know, take your thought away from what's creating that situation. And you know, the sort of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste maybe. And again, there are variations of that, and it's what works for you. And there is loads of things like that online that you can do and have. So it's, you know, it's worth taking a look at that. And it's something, an easy one that you know, young people can do, again, without anybody else even noticing, if that needs to be. I've put just a couple of things up here of quotes that were from young people. Again, things that can help, and it's suggesting things like, you know, mindfulness or yoga. I know you do yoga, Ludo. You know, going for a walk outside, nature. Journaling is a really good one to do, and the benefits of that have been really outlined now. And it's like being, you know, feeling grateful for what you do have and things like that. You know, and again, all these strategies are really important at the moment, because you know, people experience anxiety. It's you know, at really high levels for some people at the moment. I love this one, having an achievements jar, where they write things down and they put an achievement and they date it, and you know, look at it the following year or something, or even 5 years later, and like, oh, when I was 15, look. But just the here and now, actually writing down a positive something and putting it somewhere, you know, it's sort of an alternative to a journal, really.
Great, yeah.
The relationship, I think, is really high with COVID, and we'll just take a look at a little bit of COVID. And you know, and as this says, we're all in it together. You know, we're all experiencing things that we've never experienced before. You know, and it's hard. And I think this time round, unlike the first lockdown we had, where yes, it caused some anxiety and everything, but we felt that it was going to be for an amount of time and then be sorted and go. And obviously it's very apparent that's not the case. And this time round, one, it's winter, we can't all be sitting out in our gardens and everything else. Two, you know, January is a usually tricky time of year, but also this is reality. And you know, yes, we've got the vaccine coming, but it's here to stay with us a bit. So it's looking at ways that we can just create our new norm, and things until we get to a place where things are relatively back to normal, if you know, if that's going to be the case. For young people with pre-existing mental health problems, the current climate can be even more difficult. You know, the change, the uncertainty, which again is something that can create for some people mental health difficulties, it's really increased at the moment. So they're particularly vulnerable at the moment. You know, for them, sort of fears of returning to school, falling behind with work, and for some, just, you know, being at home when school is their happy place. And even when school is also their safe place, that's difficult. It's demonstrated by a finding that was done in September 2020, where it's evidence that there's a rise in young people describing their mental health as poor. And I'd imagine if the same study is repeated, it will have risen even further. So we come to where the sort of peak of this presentation, I suppose. What can we as tutors do to give our students extra support during the current time? You know, which is a really challenging time. First, don't be afraid to use some of your session to be a mentor. You know, talk, ask questions, check in with them. You know, it's much better to spend 5-10 minutes even of your session to really discuss things with them, know what's going on in the world and things like that, if it helps them and it helps support them, and be okay with doing that. It's important, yeah, to be really present with the child, sort of actively listen. We you know, we expect their attention, give them yours. Make sure that you're consistent, don't judge, listen and value what they're saying. Model positivity. Be positive yourself, bring in a positive slant to something that they may have said. You know, focus on the positive rather than dwelling on the negative. You know, if you get a comment, oh, I hate working online, look at it and try and sort of change the slant. Yeah, it's tricky for a lot of people. However, it's really good that I can see you. It's really good your teacher can see you. You know, you can ask them questions as you go along, which is much better than working on your own. That kind of thing, to bring a positive into what they're finding as a negative. You know, something along those lines. I'm not saying that's easy always, but it's doable. You might just have to think a bit outside the box sometimes. Perhaps if they're feeling a bit low, make suggestions that they perhaps phone a friend and speak to a friend rather than texting their friends. You know, how important it is to connect. The important part here, though, is to acknowledge that it's okay to not be on top form. You know, it's okay some days that you're actually really fed up, or it's okay some days that you haven't got all of your work done, you know, and that goes for us as well. We're in a completely unusual time here, and it's okay that we're not all on top form. We're having to adjust to how we are at the moment, and it's really important that young people and children are aware of that. I'm not saying that's used as, it should be used as an excuse not to do something, but you know, it's knowing it's okay. Yeah, and sometimes it's good to share your own experiences with that. You know, it can help them validate theirs. For example, I'm finding it really hard to be motivated today. I need a really good night's sleep, and I'm sure I'll be on top form tomorrow. Bringing it back to, so they can sort of maybe, yeah, I'm a bit the same. I didn't really sleep well last night, and creating that kind of conversation and knowing that's okay. Do be aware though that if it's a change of mood or lack of motivation that goes on for a while, then it may be cause for concern and needs some further consideration. Just in general chit chat, talk about things such as exercise, sleep, food, self-care, and creating regular routines to reintroduce some structure. You know, we have all lost our regular routines. You know, young people, children, they've lost their routine of school. And some schools, you know, some schools are doing, you know, 8:45 registration and lessons on that. Other schools, not so much. So it's creating that, you know, suggesting that they create a routine for themselves. And obviously that's for the parents to be involved in. So talking is really important. You know, connectivity is the thing we're all missing. And for children, not being able to see their peers is really frustrating. One of my tricks at the moment is to ask my students to tell me 3 things they've done since I've last seen them. Usually the reply is nothing, or, you know, dunno. And I then make a couple of suggestions like, well, have you been outside, or have you made something, or have you watched something? And usually it ends up by the end of the conversation with, oh yeah, whatever it may be. And so again, it brings in, rather than this, well, I haven't done anything, to, well, actually you might have, you know, have you played a game with your family? Have you done this? Whatever that scenario be. And it creates that positivity, that it's not all negative.
Yeah.
And I've said about routine and the importance of that and structure. And lastly, maybe be open to changing your tutoring approach. Be flexible. You know, if you can tell a student's not feeling great, they're feeling overwhelmed, then take this into account. Slow down, maybe change activity, maybe talk a bit more, focusing on the moment. If the student is perhaps missing the social interactions, bring in some more fun activities, something that they not only enjoy but can learn from. You know, it's one of the benefits we have of being tutors, that we can be flexible. We, you know, we can instantly change if the need arises. So, you know, have that sort of plan B, you know, in your toolkit. Have that, okay, today's not going to plan because they're really tired, or because they're this, because they're whatever. So I'm going to bring in plan B, you know, and if we need to learn about, I don't know, adjectives, say, we'll do that next session. And that's fine to do. And like I said, that's a benefit of tutoring. It's not like we have to have the structure of the classroom environment. And I would say most importantly is to smile and create laughter. You know, if it means like, can you tell me a joke or whatever, but it's really important for all of us at the minute to create that. And we have the opportunity to do that within our sessions if we choose to. However, all of these strategies are only useful if you also take care of yourself. And it's important, you need to be kind to yourself. You know, be realistic with your expectations. If you haven't got much done in the day as you usually would, then it's okay. Focus on what's manageable for you in that moment. make sure again that you have people to talk, either feelings or just to talk generally, to create some laughter for you or just take you out of your current situation. You know, doing that can make life less overwhelming and scary, really, which at the moment, and it also makes you feel that you're not alone. You know, we all feel that, oh, it's me, it's me, it's me. Well, actually, no, everybody's struggling. So, and it's okay to say so. And one really important thing is make sure you get outside. You know, if you can once a day, great. The outdoors, nature can really lift your mood, and it can keep you grounded, whether you go outside for exercise, whether you go outside just to look at the scenery. It's really important. You know, particularly at the minute where people aren't going to the workplace and have a natural need to go, you know, need to go out. And with yourself too, if you feel your own mood has changed significantly and for a period of time, do look into your own well-being, and do seek advice if you need to. Don't be afraid to do that, you know, because like I said, we focus in on our young people and our children, but you know, you're important too, and you need to recognize that. And just lastly, here's a list of some places that you might be able to get some extra knowledge from, if you like. Young Minds in particular is a really valuable resource and can give you really good understanding of certain things, and comes at it from a young person's point of view as well. You know, as is Mind and Heads Together. They're all charities really that can help, and you can, if need be, signpost parents to, if you feel that the child or the parent themselves are struggling with their child. You know, don't be afraid to put things out there. And I think that's it, if that's given you some kind of insight.
I mean, I just feel so lucky that I was able to experience that kind of firsthand. There was so many really useful points, some points that people will have heard before, some points that people certainly won't have heard before, and even the points that people have heard before, tips that they used, that they previously used themselves. It's really good to go back over those and just get a bit of a refresher, think about how you can use them in a new light, perhaps with a new student. So
Sure.
yeah, that was 50 minutes of really very useful and very kind of practicable guidance, with
Good.
some wonderful stories kind of woven in. So thank you so much, Amanda.
You're very welcome. It's been interesting to do.
Yeah, I'm sure it's taught you a lot as well.
It has. It
It's
has.
really good to sum up this month's theme like that. Obviously, 2021 was the start of our themes within the Qualified Tutor community. So we'll be carrying those on. For anyone who's watching this, please do contribute to this this upcoming month's theme, which will be special educational needs and disabilities. And there will be more themes throughout the year, ranging from kind of exam tips to what works in tutoring, the kind of the pedagogical research, a whole range of topics really, which are relevant to the time of year that theme comes on. So we thought mental health would be very important kind of midwinter, and then we move into kind of exam tips and prep in the Easter, and then something a bit lighter in the summer. So thank you very, very much, Amanda. That brings to
You're
close our
very welcome. You're very
community design
welcome.
workshop, and please do, we'll see you all in the community afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.